I heard through the grapevine that you like food and crime. Well, you're in the perfect place because that's just what we specialize in. This is Killer Bites, a scary and delicious true crime cooking show. In today's episode, I'm going to spill all the deets about how Marvin Gaye was killed while making peanut pretzel and potato chip cookies. If you'd like to bake with me, check out the recipe in the description below. You may know Marvin Gaye from his hit songs Ain't No Mountain High Enough or I Heard It Through the Grapevine. But did you know he tried out for the NFL, was on the run from the IRS, and fell victim to a terrible crime committed by his father? Yeah, this story is loaded. To start off my cookie batter, I'm gonna mix butter with peanut butter, baking soda, and vanilla. On the morning of April 1st, 1984, Marvin Senior couldn't find an insurance policy document anywhere in his house. He was super mad because he had been searching for it for almost 2 days, so he ended up blaming the missing paper on his wife, Alberta. At the time, Marvin Jr., aka the Motown musical legend we all know and love, was living with his parents. For clarity's sake, I'll call the dad Marvin Senior and his son, the musician, Marvin. Marvin's parents fought a lot, and on this specific day, his dad was yelling at his mom throughout the house about this insurance paper, and he was over it. At one point, Alberta came into Marvin's room, either for comfort or protection, and Marvin Senior kept shouting at her. Marvin told his dad to stop screaming and said he should come in and talk to Alberta face to face if he really had an issue. But Marvin Senior refused to go in his son's room. So Marvin told him, if you don't ever come in here, don't ever come into my room again. And with that, Marvin Senior stormed in. I just want to take a moment to say Marvin was 44 years old at this time, and his dad was very abusive. I'm sure all of you watching this are like, I can't believe this guy would speak to his father that way, but trust me, it was justified. Well, what started as a verbal fight quickly became physical. Marvin got off his bed and told his dad he had enough of his crap and was going to mess him up. He then knocked his dad down on the ground and began kicking him. The whole time, Alberta was shouting for the men to stop, but her words weren't working, so she jumped in and separated them. Marvin Senior retreated to his room while Marvin told his mother, I'm packing my stuff and getting out of this house. Father hates me and I'm never coming back. But the fight wasn't over just yet. The reason Marvin Senior went to his room was to grab his .38 pistol. After doing so, Marvin Senior headed back for his son's room where he pointed the barrel at Marvin's chest and pulled the trigger. Marvin immediately fell to the floor. But Marvin Senior got even closer to his son and fired again at point-blank range. The whole time, he said nothing. Standing 8 feet away, Alberta just witnessed her husband execute her son. One of the most spine-chilling details about this incident is that the .38 Marvin Senior used was actually gifted to him by Marvin just a few months earlier. It was also one day before Marvin's 45th birthday. Whoa, that's crazy and really sad. Alberta ran away in horror, and her younger son, Frankie, who lived in the guest house, was the first one to enter the scene just after the incident. He rushed to hold his brother for his last moments alive. Before taking his final breath, Marvin said, I got what I wanted. I couldn't do it myself, so I had him do it. It's good. I ran my race. There's no more left in me. Oh, wow. So did he want his dad to snuff him? When the cops arrived, Marvin Senior was just chilling on the porch with the firearm still in his hand. Now I'm going to add in almond flour and coconut sugar. Apparently, a police officer asked him if he loved his son, and he said, let's say I didn't dislike him. Marvin was rushed to the hospital, but he was pronounced lifeless upon arrival. As for Marvin Senior, he told the police that he was scared of his son and only pulled the trigger in self-defense. But he claimed he didn't know there were any bullets. He thought the weapon was either loaded with BB pellets or completely empty. Keep in mind, this was his .38. I'm sure he knew exactly what was in the barrel that day. And even if he didn't, don't you think he would have stopped after firing the first round and realizing it was a real bullet? When Marvin Senior was told by a detective that his son had passed away, he started bawling his eyes out. Again, I don't buy this. He literally watched his son fall to the floor and fired at him again. Marvin Senior later recounted, I just didn't believe it. I thought he was kidding me. I said, oh God of mercy. Oh, oh, oh. It just shocked me. I just went to pieces, just cold. I just sit there and I didn't know what to do, just sitting there like a mummy. Even still, Marvin Senior said his son had become something like a beast-like person. He claimed his act was provoked by the intense beating Marvin gave him after he came into his room. Before the trial, doctors examined Marvin Senior's brain and found a tumor. His legal team claimed this made him mentally incompetent to stand trial, but the judge disagreed, considering how aware Marvin Senior seemed to be about everything. With the knowledge that Marvin had substances in his system and the photos of Marvin Senior's alleged injuries from his son, the judge entered a plea deal with the defendant. On September 20th, 1984, Marvin Senior pleaded no contest to a voluntary manslaughter charge. At his sentencing, Marvin Senior said, "If I could bring him back, I would. I was afraid of him. I thought I was going to get hurt. I didn't know what was going to happen. I'm really sorry for everything that happened. I loved him. I wish he could step through this door right now. I'm paying the price now." Yeah, the entire world wished you could bring him back too. Should have thought twice before you grabbed the firearm. Marvin Senior was given a 6-year suspended sentence plus 5 years on probation. After the trial, Alberta filed for a divorce and Marvin Senior went to live in a nursing home. In 1998, Marvin Senior passed away at 84 years old. If only his son was lucky enough to live that long. Speaking of which, a big funeral was held for Marvin at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. Over 10,000 people were in attendance, including his 2 ex-wives, 3 children, mom, siblings, and fellow musicians. Marvin was given a plot at the cemetery, but his family got him cremated to spread his ashes near the Pacific Ocean. Now I'm going to add in potato chips, pretzels, and chocolate chips. So now that you know the details of how the infamous Marvin Gaye lost his life, let's travel back in time to see what led to this boiling point between him and his father, starting with Marvin Senior's backstory. Marvin Senior was born in Kentucky to a physically abusive father. As a kid, Marvin Senior joined the Pentecostal church, and years later, he moved to Washington, D.C. to become a minister. That's where he met his wife, Alberta Cooper. Marvin Senior and Alberta got married in 1935, but at the time, Alberta already had a son from a previous relationship. His name was Michael. Well, Marvin Senior said he wouldn't raise another man's son, so Alberta had to send Michael to live with her sister, Pearl. Wait, what? That is so wrong. I can't believe this guy was a minister and he's acting like that. That must have been so hard for Michael to grow up that way too. In 1937, Marvin Senior and Alberta had their first child together. It was a girl named Jeannie. 2 years later, Marvin Jr. was born, followed by 2 more kids, Frankie and Zeola. In 1970, Marvin Senior actually had another child as a result of an affair. Yo, what a hypocrite. He threw shade at his wife for having a kid before they met, but then he cheated on her and had another kid? That's cold. So Marvin Senior was known for being extremely strict with his kids. He made them observe an extended Sabbath on Saturdays and was constantly quizzing his kids about Bible verses. If they answered incorrectly, Marvin Senior would smack them. If they answered correctly, they got nothing except immunity from getting smacked, which I guess is something. The oldest daughter, Jeanne, later said Marvin was targeted the most by her father. Marvin described living with his father as living with a king, a very peculiar, changeable, cruel, and all-powerful king. There wasn't a time when he wasn't covered in bruises. Later in life, Marvin reflected that if it weren't for his mom, he would have taken his own life as a kid. That makes me so sad. I never knew his childhood was this traumatizing. But amid the pain, Marvin got into music. He fell in love with R&B and doo-wop music styles and mastered the piano and drums. He also joined the high school glee club. Iconic. As a teen, Marvin became a bit of a rebel and started skipping classes to go to concerts for artists like Sam Cooke and Jackie Wilson. This really ticked off his dad, who believed concerts were sinful, as well as school dances, sports, and literally any other normal activity a child or teen would want to partake in. Marvin Senior would frequently kick Marvin out of the house anytime he didn't like the way he was acting, and I thought my parents were strict. Something to know about Marvin Senior, though, is that a lot of people speculated he was homosexual. There were a lot of rumors about him wearing female clothing, and Marvin recalled, "There have been periods when my father's hair was very long and curled under, and when he seemed quite adamant in showing the world the girlish side of himself." These rumors resulted in a lot of bullying for Marvin and his brother Frankie, who were also both accused of being homosexual. The boys were constantly having to defend themselves and their dad. Gosh, people can be so awful sometimes. Marvin ended up dropping out of high school and enlisting in the Air Force. He allegedly faked a mental illness to get discharged because he didn't like the lowly tasks they were giving him. After that, Marvin put all of his efforts into his music and was starting to get noticed. He worked with a handful of singing groups before moving to Detroit and performing for the founder of Motown Records, Berry Gordy, who ended up signing a record deal with him. He also hit it off with Berry's older sister, Anna, who became his first wife. In 1961, as Marvin's music career was starting to take off, he added an E to the end of his last name. He said he made the change because it seemed more professional, but most people theorize Marvin did it to silence the hubbub about the suggestive last name and also distinguish and distance him from his dad, who was nothing short of a terrible man. For the next decade, Marvin's songs rose to the top of the music charts and he was dubbed the Prince of Motown. But Marvin said he felt like Berry and Anna's puppet and didn't deserve his success. In 1970, Marvin's friend and Motown duet partner Tammy Terrell passed away. This was really hard on him. After just getting over a bad wave of depression, Marvin thought he'd try out for the Detroit Lions. Yeah, the NFL team. Marvin was super committed to getting in too. He made a home gym and started running 5 miles a day. But as much as Marvin bulked up and trained, he didn't make the team. Some people think he was turned down because the team was scared of the possible injuries that could have affected his music career. In 1972, Marvin came back to Washington, D.C., where he was honored with Marvin Gaye Day. That day, there was a huge ceremony and Marvin performed at the Kennedy Center. He said it was one of the first times he felt like he made his father proud. Yo, if that's what you have to do to make your father proud, then I'm SOL. So Marvin and Anna got a divorce in 1977. He ended up marrying another woman named Janice and divorcing her shortly thereafter. Marvin then moved to Maui to escape the IRS because they were after him for a bunch of taxes he failed to pay back. From there, he bounced around to London and Belgium in efforts to avoid getting thrown in jail for the large sum of money he owed the government, which was upwards of $4.5 million. In Belgium, Marvin was able to cut back on his substance use. He began working out and going to church again. He had gotten his mojo back. In 1982, Marvin released a new album titled Midnight Love and subsequently went on a concert tour that, whether he knew it or not, would be his last. In 1983, Marvin completed his tour and was at a very low point in life. He was dealing with paranoia, money troubles, and the pain of all of his past failed relationships. His mom just got kidney surgery, so he thought it'd be best for him to move in with his parents, who now lived in Los Angeles. That way, Marvin could take care of his mom and not worry about having to find a place to live. And technically, Marvin bought that mansion for his parents, so it wasn't like he was mooching off of them or anything. Well, for the past decade or so, Marvin Senior was no longer working in ministry and his marriage had completely deteriorated. Yeah, I'm sure that affair didn't help. At the time Marvin moved in, Marvin Senior was away for a few months. But when he came back, things really started to shake up at the Gaye household. Marvin Senior had recently sold their family home in Washington without telling Alberta, which angered Marvin. Because of that, and the many other reasons, Marvin wanted nothing to do with his father and tried to avoid him at all costs. Anytime they'd cross paths, things became extremely violent. Just like the olden days. Alberta said, "My husband never wanted Marvin, and he never liked him. He used to say he didn't think he was really his child. I told him that was nonsense. He knew Marvin was his, but for some reason he didn't love Marvin. And what's worse, he didn't want me to love Marvin either." I don't understand what Marvin Senior's deal was. Why was he so set on making his son's life hell? A little before the crime went down, Marvin Senior kicked Marvin out of his home after a fight. But Marvin came back and tried to make amends. He said, "I have just one father. I want to make peace with him." It's so sad because all Marvin wanted was to be loved and accepted by his dad, and instead he was rejected and later whacked by him. There were a lot of factors that contributed to the crime that April day. Marvin and his dad had a terrible relationship. Marvin Senior seemed to have a skewed outlook on life from his own messed up childhood, and Marvin was using substances. Tensions were high and Marvin Senior let his anger get the best of him. There is a lot of talk about the weapon Marvin Senior used that day. It was gifted to him by Marvin on Christmas in 1983. Marvin said it was to protect his dad from intruders, but some people think it was a form of premeditated suicide. This is because Marvin had attempted to take his own life on multiple occasions. He also probably knew if he equipped his dad with such a weapon, he would probably use it on him at some point. That theory is primarily based on Marvin's last words. "I got what I wanted. I couldn't do it myself, so I had him do it." That's super conflicting, but at the end of the day, Marvin Senior is the one who pulled the trigger. I feel like he had to have known what was in the barrel of the pistol that day. There's no way he truly thought there were BB pellets inside, right? And while Marvin was troubled himself, I think most of his hardships stem from his traumatic childhood, which is also a result of Marvin Senior taking his traumatic childhood out on everyone else. Gosh, this really is one sick cycle. Well, I hope this story hasn't made you too salty, because these salty and sweet cookies are ready to eat. See you next time.